Things we recommend when you're looking, so you're wanting to do a Salesforce install and you know that you want outside developer help for the integration part of the site. We think it's pretty important for them to have a focus on nonprofits because as we were talking about before, Salesforce provides different things depending on if you're nonprofit or commercial, and understanding what those differences are is important, especially when you're talking about deep object integration. If the vendor is going to try and set you up with like sales contacts, that's different from volunteer information, and they should be familiar with that sort of stuff. We started without prior Salesforce experience, and I'm here to tell you having Salesforce experience is really, really important to be able to work efficiently. So we were grateful that someone hired us without that, but for you guys, find someone who's done it.
Don't do that.
Yeah, ask them.
I mean, a tendency of programmers to be like, oh yeah, some third-party system, we'll just figure it out. It has a really steep learning curve.
Yeah.
And I mean, you don't want to waste your time.
Yeah, we're still learning it, and it's an ongoing process. So ask them, have you done this before? What was it like? How long did it take?
And talk to the client.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We think in general, like if you're going to go Drupal Salesforce, the reason for that is for the tighter integration. Like you wouldn't pick the two fresh just to then do kind of a simple third-party thing where you're iframing a form, because you could do that with other systems other than Drupal and probably have a nicer time with it. So that being said, the type of integration you're going to work for probably going to need custom programming. And so to that end, they should be able to program PHP. They should be able to talk to you about words like version control, hosting, security. Those are questions that you may not have the detailed knowledge of, but they should be able to converse in that. And if you have someone in your organization who's technical who can kind of vet that, do that, because it's the kind of thing where a vendor, yeah, we can do that, sure, security, that's great. And that's the thing that's really going to make a difference when you're 3 months into the project and it turns out that the data that we thought was clean is actually not clean, because no data is clean, right? Mm-hmm. And they need to do some migration changes to it, and you need a programmer to do some of that, or maybe customize Drupal, right? Have they written a Drupal module? That's a really good question to ask. Are they active in the Drupal community? Those are good signals you can use to find out if someone is going to be able to continue through the entire project. We mentioned this, multiple deployment environments. The multiple environments is important. If you've worked with Salesforce, you might have heard of the Salesforce sandbox. That's the idea of having a copy of what you have set up in Salesforce, all of your object definitions, but it's in kind of a development environment that gets a subset of the data, but it looks like what your real data is. And when you're doing a new install, you don't want the developer to be connecting to your real customer data while they're making changes, while they're testing integration.
Which a surprising number of people do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, so the developer you're working with should be comfortable saying, yeah, here's the dev site and it's connecting to the Salesforce sandbox, and here's how we transition to going to live data, and yeah, that's totally easy, we do that all the time. That's what you want to hear, because you don't want them to call you up and say, yeah, one of our developers made a mistake on the live site and you lost half your customer records. Sorry. Like, maybe there's some mitigation for that, but that's not the call you want to get. So that's something else you can talk to them about. And oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add there that the sandboxes that you get with the nonprofit version of Salesforce do not come pre-populated with data, so you have to put your own data in really there for that to work.
Yes.
There are some tools you can use. I think it's called like Data Loader that Salesforce has, so you can basically like export your content from Drupal to a CSV and then reload it. You know what I'm talking about, Julia?
Yeah, Data Loader, and then there's Jitterbit, which is free. Data into, it's kind of a pain to use, but you could use it for getting data into Salesforce also.
Data Loader comes free as part of Salesforce, so you have that. I know one of the problems I've had trying to import data to a test environment in the sandbox is that it does not create, like with your contact data, it does not create the relationships with sub-objects.
Oh, because that
and that gets to be
not
really messy.
Say it again?
It won't create, you can export your live version of Salesforce data contact table into your sandbox, but then if you export the contact's activities from your live instance of Salesforce and try to import that into your sales box, there's nothing to tie those activities with those contacts.
Is the full sandbox still super expensive?
Yeah.
Yes, however, there's been a lot of push in the Salesforce nonprofit forums asking the foundation to get like a 1 month, like we could rent a full version sandbox for a short period of time for that type of development, and I imagine the way they do things that might be an option in the near future.
It would be really good, because the relationships are important. The Drupal integration can respect that, and you can have multiple content types related to each other based on that. And if that's a big part of what you're building, you want to test it.
But yeah, I mean, that does speak to the importance of choosing a good vendor, because you have to have, the code has to be really carefully written, so you're not deleting, you know, a few thousand records, or maybe worse, like editing some over time.
Yeah, kind of
and then
silently
it
inputting
takes
wrong
like
data.
3 months to realize that there's a problem.
Yeah. Which speaks to communication. Like, the best thing is responsive communication, complete communication. That's going to be, as in all things, a very key indicator of success.
And also, I mean, I'd just say contributing back to the community. I think one of the problems with the Salesforce module for Drupal for a while was that, like, I think at one point there were like 5 different forks of the module that different shops had, and none of it was getting developed out in the open. And that's really changed, like, in the last year, and everyone's contributing to one, you know, central place. So everyone gets the benefits of, you know, basically 5 different shops' work.
Yeah.
So you want to have a vendor who's going to be doing that and contributing features and bug fixes back.
Is this Drupal 7 or Drupal 8 or?
Drupal 7 is what we've been demonstrating. That was the live demo.
Yeah. And we have Drupal 6, but I don't think at this point we would do a new.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do a new Drupal site in 6. You guys have any questions?
I know this isn't the title of the workshop is Drupal, but if you just had, let's just say, a WordPress site or something, and you were happy with that site and it was pretty good, what kind of do-it-yourself would you suggest for integrating with Salesforce?
To do what?
To receive donations, take registrations, forms.
First place I would look is I would go to WordPress.org and just look and see what's there for out-of-the-box modules. Try and get a sense for, does Salesforce on WordPress really exist in a healthy way, or is it like half of one module that actually doesn't work because everyone has file plugs against it? You can look on the project page, just search for Salesforce in the list on WordPress.org, and just see what's there. You might find, it's been a while since I've looked, but you might find 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think there's a web to lead plugin. But you know, it sounds like what you're describing, you could just have iframes for the form, and then, you know, whatever you use for donations in Salesforce probably has an iframe that you can use as well. That's, I mean, it's
I'm
pretty
finding a
balanced.
lot of this stuff they're trying to move away from iframes because of the security issues, I guess. But Salesforce does have Salesforce sites, and there's an app called Form Assembly that you can add to Salesforce that I think is designed for writing web forms. So you might want to look into that.
Sure.
I haven't been using it yet.
The key thing is there's actually a lot of options, a lot of different ways, and it all depends on what you need and what you plan to do with it. A good vendor or a good consultant should be able to outline some of that for you and give you some sense of trade-offs, because it's going to be hard to know just looking at two ways, iframe, site,